Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and in today's video I wanted to once again cover the NBA draft lottery, but I'm not going to just go over what happened the other night because I already did that in a previous video. Instead, I have another really interesting aspect of the NBA draft lottery and this year specifically to talk about, and that is, are the new lottery odds or the new draft lottery system completely unfair, specifically at the top of the draft? If you're a Cavs or Bulls or Suns or Hawks fan, you were probably shocked when you saw where your first round pick landed this year and how far down the order your team fell. And the thought has probably crossed your mind that the NBA went too far in changing the lottery odds and now your team has to deal with the consequences of that. And that thought is what I'm going to be looking at in this video. So as many of you know, the NBA decided to change the lottery odds beginning this year, and this was a rule change that was passed back in 2017 that was supposed to deter teams from tanking, which in some people's eyes is a big issue in the NBA. It has become increasingly common over the last 5 to 7 years for teams that know that they aren't going to be very good to intentionally try and be as bad as possible to earn a high draft pick, and there are a couple of reasons why this became such a big problem in the NBA specifically. The league is unique in the way that newly drafted players can have such a huge impact on winning or at least making a team competitive right away, and it became increasingly clear that the best way to compete for championships was to get together a core of 1 or 2 or even sometimes 3 really great young players all on the same team, and the best way to do that is through the draft. This is especially true for smaller market teams that don't have the same luxuries that the Knicks or the Lakers do in free agency. They simply don't have the same attraction for max contract level players on the open market, so pretty much the only way for them to get great players is to draft them. And the best way to get the best chance at drafting a great young player is to get a high draft pick, and the best way to do that is to lose a lot of games. Now, not many, if any, teams have been able to exactly replicate that strategy because it's supremely difficult to properly develop young players while also being an awful team for 2 to 3 years in a row, but that was the idea, and a lot of teams caught on to this strategy and were intentionally trying to lose games, either by not putting together a very good team in the first place, or resting their best players late in the season to really tank their record, or any number of other methods. Teams were fully invested in this tanking strategy. And I'm talking about it in the past tense, like tanking isn't a thing anymore, which I shouldn't be because it is still and will continue to be a strategy used by a number of teams around the league, specifically in smaller markets. But let's get back to the lottery odds reform for a second now that I've outlined why it came about in the first place. The idea behind the reform was to, quote, flatten out the odds, basically making it so that the teams with the worst records in the league had a lower chance of actually getting a top 4 pick that they were tanking for in the first place, creating less of an incentive to lose on purpose. And as you can see, the changes made in the odds beginning with this year's lottery were pretty drastic. In the past, the lottery really wasn't that big of a deal unless it was years in which prospects like LeBron James or Anthony Davis were up for grabs with the number 1 pick. But even then, there wasn't that much suspense with who would get the first pick because the odds were so heavily in favor of the teams with the worst records in the league, but that just isn't a thing anymore as we saw this year. 3 of the teams that ended up in the top 4 were originally 7 or lower, with the Lakers going from 11 to 4, the Grizzlies from 8 to 2, and the Pelicans from 7 to 1, with the Knicks being the only team to maintain their top 4 spot with the 3rd pick. But that's where you start to run into an issue with this new system. Now, don't get me wrong, from an entertainment standpoint, this new system is outstanding. There's so much more variance, there's so much more opportunity for crazy things to happen, and from a TV show perspective, that is a great thing. But from a competitive standpoint, maybe this isn't the best solution, because the whole point of having a draft in order of worst to best record is that without trades, the worst teams in the league have the best opportunities, in theory, of getting top tier talent and becoming a good team in the future. Now, you can get into a discussion about how stupid it is to reward a team for being bad and all these other ways that teams can improve other than the draft and how other leagues outside of the US deal with these kinds of things, but that isn't what this video is about. The point is that this is the way that teams that aren't very good are supposed to get better in the NBA, is through the draft, and teams were just taking advantage of that system, so the league wanted to make it less effective, but they may have gone too far. Obviously, the point of this change was to make tanking less prevalent, but what about the teams that are just bad for reasons other than tanking? The Cleveland Cavaliers, for example, they've been a really good team for the past 4 years before losing LeBron in free agency for a second time, and you can obviously point to them for a lot of the blame as to why that happened. But they weren't necessarily tanking this season, they just weren't very good. They didn't have a ton of talent, and what they did have was either injured like Kevin Love, a rookie like Colin Sexton, or just okay NBA players like Jordan Clarkson. So in a regular year, they'd have a very good chance of getting a top 3 pick to improve their talent level, but this lottery and all the ones moving forward aren't going to work that way. Now, the Cavs did end up with the 5th pick this year, and they've had crazy lottery luck in the past, so they're not really the team to complain about this. But is this new solution really going to work long term? When you take the tanking conversation out of the equation, which teams in the lottery needed a top 4 pick the most in terms of a lack of talent on the roster? That isn't accounting for any free agency possibilities that they might have, just the guys they have on their team right now and how good their team is. The answer to that question certainly isn't the Pelicans or the Lakers. Obviously, the Knicks need help, and even the Grizzlies do as well, but the team that won the lottery and the team that went from pick 11 to pick 4 are not the most talent-needy teams in the league at all, yet they're going to be rewarded with the opportunity to pick one of the best prospects in this draft class, and the reason is simply because of luck. Is that really what we want the NBA to be based so heavily on? The spread of young talent across the league being determined by the bounce of a few ping pong balls. The Pelicans getting Zion Williamson and the Lakers getting whoever they do with the 4th pick, or however they choose to use it in a trade, or any number of other ways the lottery went down this year, all of those things are going to have a gigantic impact on the league over the next 10 to 12 years, and by extension, all of those impacts could have been drastically different if one team or another was a bit more or less lucky in the lottery, which when you think about it that way, how much the bouncing of a few ping pong balls can completely change the future of a multi-billion-dollar sports league, the idea of a lottery sounds pretty idiotic, doesn't it? But that's just the thing, because of all the points that I made in the first section in this video, a draft lottery is largely necessary in the NBA, simply because tanking is so easy to do and so rewarding with top-level talent. If a team knew that they'd have the 1st overall pick in this year's draft guaranteed, and the guaranteed chance to draft Zion Williamson with the pick if they just threw away the entire season and had the worst record in the league, we'd probably have seen a team finish with less than 10 wins this season. Now, to be fair, the teams at the bottom of the league still had awful records, but maybe that'll change moving forward. Maybe this draft lottery will force teams to focus more on developing their players and just dealing with where their lottery pick ends up, because it's no longer as easy to almost guarantee yourself a top 3 pick. I don't think that this will be the end of tanking completely, because a 14% chance at the number 1 pick is still valuable because it gives you the best possible odds, even if that didn't work out that way this year. But this is probably going to be an event that we'll look back on that changed the mindset of a few franchises. But really the bigger issue here is that so many things about the league over the next 10 to 12 years are going to be decided by the luck of the lottery. And this new system now makes drastic, unforeseen circumstances even more likely than just the worst teams in the league getting the high draft picks. But really, this isn't a new thing. The lottery has always played a huge role in how things go in the NBA in the future, whether it's the Patrick Ewing lottery or the LeBron James lottery or any number of other ones. The fortunes of entire conferences have been hugely impacted simply by luck, and unfortunately there just isn't any way around that. With the way that the NBA is set up and how impactful tanking can be, the lottery is a necessity, and I understand the point of changing the odds to deter teams from tanking, and that was probably a necessity as well, but I do worry that maybe they went too far when flattening out the odds. Who knows, maybe this year will just turn out to be an anomaly, and in the future, most lotteries won't have as much movement, and some of the more likely outcomes will actually happen. And even if you say that the new system went too far, but that the old system didn't do enough to prevent teams from tanking, then you have to try and find some magical middle ground that will just have its own set of issues, and then you'll just be going in a circle. So this video isn't really a call for the league to change the odds again or anything. It's just more so highlighting a realization that with this new system, now more than ever before, the NBA is going to have a lot of its history tied to the luck of the lottery. And maybe that's okay, even if it isn't a perfect model from a competitive standpoint, maybe that'll be outweighed by the entertainment aspect of it all. But you can also make the argument that having luck play such a big role in the NBA kind of takes away a little bit of what makes it such a great league. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's episode, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.